Hello everyone, this is Anishu, and in this video we will look into how we can document our backend. We will use Open API documentation with Swashbuckle for documenting our backend. So what is Swashbuckle? Swashbuckle is a library for ASP.NET Core applications that automates the generation of Open API specifications OAS documents and provides a user-friendly interface commonly known as Swagger UI for exploring and testing APIs. It allows developers to easily document their APIs, making it easier for both humans and machines to understand the capabilities of the service without access to the source code or extensive documentation. Swashbuckle simplifies the process of integrating OAS with ASP.NET Core applications, enabling developers to create well-documented APIs with minimal effort. To use Swashbuckle in our project, we first need to add the swashbuckle.aspnet core package in our project. After successful installation of the swashbuckle.aspnet core package, we need to integrate the Swashbuckle for OpenAPI documentation in our ASP.NET Core project. To do that, we need to open the program CS file, and after adding the controllers, we need to include the lines builder.services.add_endpoints_API_explorer and builder.services.add_swaggergen. These lines will help us configure Swashbuckle to generate the Open API specifications. Next, after building the app, we need to add the lines app use Swagger and app use Swagger UI to use the generated OAS file and the Swagger UI. These lines will instruct the application to expose the OAS file and provide the Swagger UI interface. Also, optionally, you can restrict the usage of the Swagger UI and the OAS file to the development environment only, as I have done. By doing this, you can ensure that the documentation is not exposed in the production environment. After enabling the Open API in our web API, we can simply run the program and visit the Swagger URL to explore the API documentation. With Swashbuckle, documenting your ASP.NET Core API is straightforward and efficient. In our Swagger UI, we can also find the link to the Swagger JSON file that holds the OS schema file of our project. But this much is not enough. Now let's try and customize the Swagger UI according to our project. Not only that, we can also try and fetch a Swagger YAML file holding the OS schema in YAML format. To customize our Swagger UI, we will be enabling the static file usage in our C# code to access CSS favicons and images from the www root folder. The use of the line app.useStaticFiles in the development environment ensures that the necessary static files are accessible to customize the UI. We will customize the Swagger UI by injecting a style sheet and using an overloaded version of the use Swagger UI and passing a void function into it. Not only that, but we have also defined endpoints for both the JSON and YAML documentation formats. With these configurations, the Swagger UI is now customized with a unique style sheet, and we have the option to access API documentation in both JSON and YAML formats. Now, to add authorship into the documentation, in the program file, instead of directly adding the swaggergen, pass a lambda expression as a configuration function to customize the documentation. Here, we are specifying the details such as the API title, description and contact information. With this configuration, the API documentation will now reflect the provided details, making it more informative and user-friendly. At the end, let's unlock the auto documentation capabilities in our web API project by enabling the XML commenting. First, in the robot controller API.cs project file, add configurations settings to enable XML comments and suppress compiler warnings. Enabling the XML comments ensures that the documentation is automatically generated by the code, enhancing both OpenAPI documentation and the IntelliSense in our IDE. Next, let's generate the XML comments file and pass it to the OpenAPI generator to extract the comments to use in the documentation. The code added inside the add swaggergen delegate in the program file fetches XML comments and integrates them into the OpenAPI documentation. Once XML comments are enabled, we can easily add them to every endpoint in our API, providing valuable insights for developers. Finally, coming to the XML comment format that we have used in our project, the summary tag describes the purpose of the endpoint. The param tag describes the parameters. The returns tag describes the return value of the endpoint. The remarks tag describes additional information or context about the endpoint. The response tag describes the possible HTTP responses returned by the endpoint. Finally, the produces response type specifies the expected HTTP response types and their corresponding status codes. As you can see, all the endpoints will have the XML commenting that is basically following this format. Now let's run the application and open Swagger UI to test our endpoints. As you can see, we can not only get a JSON documentation, but we can also get a YAML documentation as well. You can also see that now all the endpoints work perfectly fine and as intended, showing that our implementation is correct. Running the post endpoints, we can see that there is already a pre-built JSON. We just need to update the JSON and run the post command, and we can see that the post command works fine. Similarly, we can also run put endpoints and the delete endpoints. With this, I have shown you the documentation of my full web API project in ASP.NET Core. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you.